My name is Jen Calley, and I am a client services consultant with Panorama Consulting Group. Today, we are speaking with SYSPRO ERP to explore what manufacturers and distributors can expect in the next 6 to 12 months. SYSPRO is a global independent provider of industry-built ERP software designed to simplify business complexity for manufacturers and distributors, focused on delivering optimized performance and complete business visibility. The SYSPRO solution is highly scalable and can be deployed on-premise, in the cloud, or accessed via a mobile device. SYSPRO's strengths lie in a simplified approach to technology, expertise in a range of industries, and a commitment to future-proofing the customer and partner success. SYSPRO has more than 15,000 licensed companies and is in over 60 countries across 6 continents. Panorama is an independent niche consulting firm specializing in business transformation and ERP system implementations for mid to large-sized organizations worldwide. We pride ourselves on being 100% technology agnostic and independent of vendor affiliation. Panorama services include ERP selection, contract negotiation, and implementation. We also offer many business-enhancing programs such as change management, business process management, crisis management, and software expert witness testimony. Moving on to our client base. Our client portfolio is made up of many well-known local, national, and global customers across the multiple industries, including manufacturing, the private sector, government, and nonprofits. Our vendor experience does offer an experienced industry relations team and works with hundreds of different ERP and software vendors to help you handpick the best specialized value-added packages to fit your business needs. To thank you for your time today, Panorama is giving away a free 1-hour consulting session with our experts. And this is going to be offered to the first 3 respondents after today's webinar. Details of how to register will be provided at the end of our session. So with that, let's get right into this. Joining me from SYSPRO today is Paulo de Matos, Global Chief Product Officer at SYSPRO. Paulo has had more than 25 years of experience in the ERP space, and he has made significant positive impacts in the area of sales and product development.
Thanks, Jen. That's absolutely great to be here.
Paulo is also joined by Rob Summer. He's the CEO of SYSPRO APAC. With nearly 20 years in leadership roles, Rob is a senior technology industry leader. He lives and breathes client success through the application of relevant technology, including SaaS and cloud solutions.
Thanks, Jen.
And also, last but certainly not least, joining our discussion panel today is Darren Edwards, SYSPRO Sales Enablement Manager. In his current position, Darren is responsible for empowering the global sales team to demonstrate and sell SYSPRO effectively in the marketplace.
Looking forward to our discussion today, Jen.
So before we kick off with the agenda today, Darren, would you explain how SYSPRO has shaped the ERP space over the last 40 years?
Certainly. Well, SYSPRO remains the longest standing privately owned vendor of ERP software in the world. We operate in over 60 countries across 6 continents with over 600 employees. We're located across 3 key regional zones, along with an extensive partner network. And our primary method of delivering solutions to the market is through our long-standing and mature channel partner network, which is responsible for local implementations and support. We remain committed to channel partner growth and their success as we work towards further equipping them with greater knowledge and tools to succeed. And our strength lies in us being able to provide and develop specialist solutions for manufacturing and distribution sectors, and us having a deep understanding of their current and future needs. And the best way I could probably illustrate this is by mentioning our above average, perhaps leading customer retention rate of over 98%. So just to draw your attention to the numbers on the top right hand side, and as you mentioned, we have over 15,000 licensed businesses utilizing SYSPRO with over 90,000 licenses issued. And the reason why I'm just distinguishing between the number of licenses and the number of users is that SYSPRO operates on a concurrent user basis. And that bottom figure there of 300,000 actually talks to the unique number of SYSPRO users that we have globally.
Thank you, Darren. Let's take a look at today's agenda. In 2020, as we know, the world experienced unprecedented disruption in most industries. And amid this pandemic, the world could not afford for manufacturing distribution to simply grind to a halt. From food on our shelves to medical necessities such as PPE, some sectors at the heart of our economy needed to keep going at all costs. Now, some manufacturing distribution businesses have started to analyze the impact and recognize how urgently they need to adjust their operating strategies. Today, we're going to be taking a closer look at the longer-term implications of the pandemic and what the manufacturing business landscape could look like in the next 6 to 12 months' time. SYSPRO will be sharing with us some research that they conducted last year into the impact of this pandemic. We're going to learn about how countries in APAC could play a role in supply chain resiliency. We're going to find out how the role of the CFO may become indispensable in the shift to Industry 4.0. And finally, we are going to learn more about how SYSPRO ERP can assist global manufacturers to secure their digital future. Paulo, can you tell us a bit more about the research that SYSPRO conducted last year into the impact of this pandemic?
Sure. In order for us to understand how manufacturers and distributors handled the pandemic, we produced and launched an online survey. This was shared with global industry professionals across various managerial levels in manufacturing and distribution companies. So the global survey was directed to operational areas across companies' value chains, and we collected responses from business areas such as operations, Office of Finance, IT, logistics, marketing, and sales. Of significance was the large proportion of responses that we received from senior management and executives, typically responsible for decision-making in the business, which we were really pleased about. So just to highlight some of the respondents and the demographics for the context of the results of the survey, 55%, as mentioned, is a relatively high response rate of senior management inclusion in the survey. 73% of all the industry responses were directly related to organizations that manufacture and distribution goods, which is actually the industries that SYSPRO primarily services. 70% of the organizations had to deal with the complexity of multiple geographies. So these were organizations that had already been involved in complex supply chains where they were having to perform cross-border transactions. And this really was important to us because it highlighted the importance of the supply chain resiliency. 40% of the organizations over and above that had reliance on outsourced supply chain. So this provided us a very key indicator and some insights as to the impact of the pandemic, specifically on the operations or subcontract operations. So then the study then focused on the immediate impact of the pandemic and the shifting in operations of the future. So if I can just look at those insights now, we're firstly just looking at the immediate impact.
There is no doubt that this pandemic has truly caused a shift towards a greater need for efficiency and adaptiveness around the globe. What else has your research revealed regarding these inefficiencies in the current business systems?
That's really true, Jen. Our survey findings do indeed echo sentiments of those inefficiencies. So within the study, 29% of businesses expressed that their business systems just simply did not provide them with availability and the accessibility to actually help them manage the changes that the pandemic introduced. Additionally, a mere 36% of the respondents disappointingly felt that their business systems didn't support them with business continuity. And almost half of the respondents felt that their business systems lacked the ability to give them sufficient insights into their operations that they needed in order to respond timely to any change. So what did we actually mean by a lack of system availability? Well, manufacturers realized that they didn't just and only need the right tools just for running the business. They also needed the right tools for engaging with the entire ecosystem, whether that be suppliers or direct customers. And the simple reality is that in the main, they felt that their business systems just seemed to fail them.
You know, this is something that we also saw within Panorama across the board, right? The industry was caught off guard by unanticipated and unparalleled shifts.
Well, in most markets, we also saw a lot of these inefficiencies emerge due to that sudden rise of the remote workforce. And as social distancing became the new normal, entire workforces then needed to connect as well as collaborate remotely. And in the manufacturing sector, factories are heavily dependent on operators being on site to keep machines running. So it's just simply not possible for those resources to work remotely. And one particular problem is that many manufacturers still heavily rely on manual systems, and their current business systems just didn't support them. And this played havoc in their control processes such as month-end and payroll running, which in turn then delayed processing and supplier payments. And as you can imagine, had very undesirable knock-on effects through the supply chain.
So what are SYSPRO's solutions to these issues?
Well, I think, Jen, to Darren's point, while the supply chain is usually a well-oiled machine, 60% of the businesses that we had surveyed experienced supply chain disruptions. It did not have the ability to anticipate or react effectively. So just looking at some of the statistics that the survey supplied us was 30% of the respondents felt that they lacked the planning tools to effectively adjust their operations and importantly react to the ever-changing landscape. In fact, 23% of the respondents expected a loss of customers due to the inability for them to fulfill customer demands. Not all of these customer demands were directly related to having a shortage on raw materials or supply, but rather the systems were unable to cope with the change. So businesses therefore came to realize that in order to overcome these supply chain disruptions, the business operations needed to consider a completely different approach to ensure the supply chain resiliency. And with these global lockdowns, that shift in that strategic sourcing and procurement included a consideration of reshoring or even nearshoring as seen as a viable option. In fact, our survey found that 42% of the businesses had determined that they would reshore critical operations. And this reconfiguration of the supply chains has both an impact on localized requirements as well as dual sourcing policies for the supply chain certainty.
At Panorama, we're also seeing that manufacturers want to steer away from offshoring or the outsourcing of manufacturing to vendors in distant countries. How does SYSPRO believe that will give them more control over operations and the ability to forecast easier in situations like this?
Well, from SYSPRO's perspective, the securing of these supply chains is an obvious and critical consideration for supply chain resiliency. Of that, there's no doubt. But the tools and the business systems used to assist the businesses in reacting to this ongoing change is of equal importance, and it's actually a strong contributor to business resiliency. So earlier on, as we saw the pandemic with the impact, business resiliency was top of mind and on the agenda as this shone a light on the inadequacy of business systems and platforms and the platforms that organizations used. But quickly, it was determined that digital investments would be needed to address these issues. And this has actually spurred on that digital transformation, acceleration, and that need for companies to remain relevant, competitive, and to secure their digital future. But it isn't just about addressing the gaps or band-aiding that manual and siloed areas, but in a lot of cases, it's about that reimagining of what it means to have people, processes, systems, machines, and the environments working in unison in order to address the need for that immediate decision-making and the ability for the business platforms to react to that change. So yes, initially the operations were offshored. We understand that. So that was a move that happened many, many years ago, and companies enjoyed the cost benefits and the economies of scale. But now the intelligent execution on the shop floor is being refocused for that critical delivery of time to value for customers. And it's also about providing that real-time analytical capabilities to all stakeholders and putting them front and center as the consideration for what systems are going to be utilized for engaging each of the stakeholders and how they would interact with all the supply chain stakeholders. So the pandemic is continuing to act as that catalyst for change. And it's creating that inflection point that's spurring on that digital transformation and accelerating the industry 4.0.
So this poses a question. What does the future day in the life of SYSPRO customers look like with these changes?
Well, that's a great question, Jen. And in the future, SYSPRO customers, they will reimagine their future versions of themselves. And this is going to be built on digital platforms, enjoying frictionless connectedness amongst systems and platforms and organizations that are truly connected and engaged with all the market actors in their ecosystem and building on the advantages of the network effects. This is how we see that shift happening for our customers over a period of time.
And clearly, almost every business that is surviving the pandemic has learned some valuable lesson. And this research is showing the need for revised business models. Rob, can you tell us more about what your experience as a CEO in APAC has produced?
Yes, well, APAC is certainly at an inflection point for sure. On the topic of reshoring, we're certainly seeing a few very interesting trends within ASEAN, and even in recent decades, ASEAN manufacturing, which was once seen as a global phenomenon, as we all know, it's actually been overshadowed really by the meteoric rise of the Chinese factories that we all know about. But even before the pandemic, the world had been seeing an increase in wages within China, that they were rising at a dramatic rate. And what that meant was that the country's economy was shifting from what we call an export-driven model to one that's really focused on domestic consumption. And there's been a lot of press around that as well. But of course, with the pandemic now, that's added another dynamic to the situation for sure, where the global lockdowns that we've all been impacted by have certainly impacted the supply chains that have been heavily integrated and increasingly reliant on foreign raw material, in particular from China. But what that's meant is that there's been increasing shortages of parts. Manufacturers and distributors, they basically had no choice but to find alternate solutions, and that was a global phenomenon that we all saw and heard a lot about. What we are seeing in our region, which is creating this inflection point, in fact, is that we're really seeing what we can essentially see as an exodus from China, as most businesses around the world, a high percentage of them, they've come to realize that their business operations just have to consider a different approach to make sure that their supply chains are resilient. There's no choice now. So what that means basically is that there's the exodus that I've been talking about here. It's actually creating what is a huge opportunity for Southeast Asia, where they can grow significant market share. But really, that's only if they adopt the right technology strategy. In fact, what we're seeing is that Southeast Asian countries, like we can list Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, in Vietnam, they've got the potential to really become central components in this global supply chain. One of the countries, well, the biggest country in ASEAN, Indonesia, it's actually the world's fourth most populous nation, if you don't know that, and SYSPRO is also focusing on growing that market as well, because we see huge potential there.
I believe that the small and medium enterprises comprise up to 99% of all business establishments, right? They contribute to over 90% of the employment in many of the ASEAN economies. It sounds like there's a real opportunity for growth for small to mid-sized manufacturers now.
Yes, that's definitely correct, Jen. However, we've got to get back to the basics. These companies need to get back to the basics of digitization. For this particular cohort anyway, it's going to be critically important on so many levels, because in reality, Southeast Asia's digital future, it's still going to be matched by what we call a patchwork of international partnerships, and there's no doubt about that. So that's critically important.
What kind of steps are we looking at and possible challenges in making the Southeast Asian supply chain a reality?
Yeah, look, as I mentioned earlier, I think the major benefit that, or for most ASEAN countries, has been labour costs, which in most cases, in fact, has been much less than half of China's costs, which is astounding, right? So, but I guess for these countries to be attractive to multinational manufacturers and bolster its manufacturing economies, the region just can't compete on low wages alone. It's really got to focus on improving productivity, which, you know, along with making the region more attractive to foreign investment in manufacturing, it's also going to support the domestic improvements in wages and living standards, which is critically important for these ASEAN countries. But look, beyond the overall metrics, manufacturing productivity, and I'll highlight that it remains low across the region, unfortunately. So that's a real challenge for them. If we take Vietnam, for instance, which, as many would know, that it's been seen by some as a really close rival to China, in fact. But if we look at it closely, it's actually 87% less productive than China with respect to, you know, if we look at daily output per daily wage, which is quite astounding. And I guess another overlooked issue in the digital race in Southeast Asia does relate to data transparency and accountability. And if we look at it closely again, the region really still sits firmly on the demand side rather than the supply side of technology.
So Southeast Asia has some foundational elements to resolve, including improved governance and productivity measures. I want to go to another area of your neck of the woods there, Rob. Let's talk about Australia. You also manage that country. How vastly different is that region in comparison?
Yes, well, look, the local Australian landscape for the distribution and manufacturing industries has all of a sudden become mission critical services and to some extent essential businesses now in our economy. It's had a lot of press here, and they're pushing it hard and giving a lot of incentives for manufacturing to take off here. And what governments and industry bodies are now pointing out is the importance of, you know, local manufacturing and distribution industries in Australia's economic recovery after the pandemic. And many are predicting a return to what in the past was called Made in Australia, and everyone was proud and looked at the label and made sure it was made in Australia. We're really returning to that to bolster our economy. But look, I mean, technology's once again been absolutely critical to enable those businesses to operate and continue to be essential as they transition to what now is, that we've been speaking about today, what a mixed global and local production and distribution model. But look, as a result of COVID-19, most organisations had to fast track their digital transformation plans, not just in Australia but throughout the whole region. But in Australia, it was moved from years to a matter of months, so they expedited it. And here in Australia, the distribution industry in particular moved extremely quickly. Look, we've seen click and collect delivery, online e-commerce options made available pretty much overnight for some businesses, and that was really made possible because a lot of these companies and distributors already had a strong technology foundation, so it made it possible to quite easily accelerate the digital investments that had to be made, and they pretty much pivoted almost seamlessly to what we're all calling now the new normal, which was quite fascinating to watch.
So we have advanced markets such as Australia that are exploring the option to adjust business models, the ASEAN needs, and overcome this productivity gap. But generally speaking, Industry 4.0 defines the growing trend towards automation, data exchange, and technology, and the processes within the manufacturing industry, including things like IoT, IIoT. We've got cognitive computing, a lot of AIs going on, and other cyber-related systems. Rob, tell me, why is this technology truly the silver bullet to solve the challenges and opportunities in these markets?
Yeah, I like the analogy of silver bullet, but look, in fact, the research shows that digital transformation in Industry 4.0 is, it's in fact expected to deliver 1.2 trillion and 3.7 trillion in gains, which is quite extraordinary if they go down that route, which we are. So for one, it can assist ASEAN manufacturers to overcome those relatively low productivity rates we've been talking about, and try to regain their stature of as the the so-called new factories of the world. What's the biggest challenge, though, is that most of the ASEAN countries have been traditionally very slow to adapt and pick up these Industry 4.0 technologies. But as I've alluded to earlier, I think this is all about to change very quickly. In this region alone, or in the ASEAN region, they've had 40 million new internet users last year alone. The digital economy in Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam reached, in US dollar currency, 100 billion in 2020, and that's in fact projected to triple by 2025. So that's huge. And on the ground, strong demand and equally impressive investment potential. It's actually giving credence and in fact a lot of support to the bold policies and visions that are surfacing right now. In fact, this year, the member countries of ASEAN, they aim to complete a consolidated strategy for the fourth industrial revolution, which will be interesting to see that flesh out as well. And as a result, the ASEAN member states now have an opportunity to really exploit Industry 4.0 technologies and try to stake their claim to being the factory of the world. So I think we all need to watch this space very carefully, but it's quite exciting for the region, and I'm pretty excited to be part of it, to be honest, because I can see huge things happen here.
A lot of the North American manufacturers, especially within the US, have been one of the most ardent adopters of Industry 4.0. It is been this beneficial impact that's here to stay. Manufacturers are gearing up for digital transformation. Paula, what about your customers? What are their experiences and expectations in the next few months? Do you foresee transformations in your region as a gradual evolution other than a revolution?
I think, Jen, that's another great question. And what we did later on last year, we conducted once again a global study, and that revealed some great insights. But what we decided to do is to expand on it and now look to our existing customers and specifically understand any immediate plans that they are considering. We wanted to understand if they had any initiatives at play, specifically what type of investment strategies, and we aimed that study at CFOs. After all, the CFO is the leader who is most directly involved, has the view of the company's financial health and the organizational investments. So after conducting that study, now particular to the manufacturers and distributors that are utilizing SYSPRO globally, the key findings in this study reflected that the role of the manufacturing CFO 4.0 will be indispensable as the industry accelerates with their key digital transformation efforts. The study further revealed that most manufacturing businesses are still in the midst of a stabilization process, and their longer-term preparations for the company to make those new strategic moves during the recovery period are well underway. Ultimately, COVID-19 has provided that catalyst and that motivation for Industry 4.0 to the C-suite, and the CFO in particular, specifically in the mid-market, will be indispensable in translating those efficiencies and those productivity gains into the marginal benefits and that investment needed to accelerate their digital and business transformation. So I guess if I could unpack that a little bit more and look at certainly some of the results. We asked them to look into their 5-year plan and to comment on their top priorities. And the top 2 priorities that we identified as focused efforts into was their market expansion and increasing the efforts in marketing and sales. So of course, a newly imagined supply chain that will demand a very secure digital future. So as expected, the technology investments to support those top priorities will need to go hand in hand. So the goal here is they are seeking better clarity and transparency of the information right across the business to enable the enhanced decision making in real time. And this really we see as building the foundations for other strategic technologies down the line and bring the manufacturers and the distributors fully into the Industry 4.0 era. Specific areas that they're looking at as immediate investments are in areas of business intelligence, that of course, as you mentioned, with the cognitive services, artificial intelligence, machine learning. And this really is just about assisting people at making sense from masses of data, assist them with predictions, analytics, and importantly, spotting those possible trends and changes before they happen. Businesses have acknowledged and realized that they need to be far more agile and they need to have far more foresight into the possible impacts and changes. So these investments that the CFOs responded is really in new methods and capabilities within their existing ERP systems. That's to evolve the connectedness and the adaptability of their ERP systems.
We've touched on a lot about digital transformation today and Industry 4.0. What does that actually mean for SYSPRO, though?
Well, what we're seeing is a new world of supply chains versus supply chains. The disruptions of this pandemic demands a new kind of connectedness, and businesses must now engage with all of the stakeholders in the supply chain, whether it be suppliers or customers or colleagues, and it has to be in real time. And only with that level of connectivity can the systems effectively react to change and allow the discussions and decisions to take place to effectively positively react to the change and mediated by effective business insights and supported with meaningful data. And what this means to us at SYSPRO is that what we're doing is right by focusing our solutions and roadmap on delivering digital enablement and transformation capabilities such as real-time supply chain insights, shop floor data capture, machine integration, social collaboration tool, and things like built-in and third-party connected services and supply chain portals. And the availability of all of these with business process automation tools to support them and all working together seamlessly, providing that end-to-end digital solution, enabling the insights into the operation and granting a business the agility to be able to, as Paolo mentioned, foresee and quickly respond to those disruptions. And for us, this sort of engagement and solutions absolutely encapsulates Industry 4 in a nutshell. And for us, it's all about, us at SYSPRO, being able to help businesses ensure that they have the right systems in place to secure their digital future.
So how does SYSPRO fit into this digital future picture?
Well, firstly, it's an outcomes-based answer. For our customers to become future ready, we work with them to consider the digital challenges and the digital changes required to the enterprise. And we consider it on two dimensions. First is the customer experience, and the second is the operational efficiency. Our second departure point here is then we apply a technology lens. And we evaluate what emerging and innovative technologies are best suited to solve the historical inefficiencies. For example, when we're considering the shop floor and the diagram in the slide, which digitalization techniques are best suited? If we consider some of the inefficiencies that were experienced on shop floors with the average manufacturer in the past, they had siloed production areas. They may have had one or two modernized techniques with reporting, but it was disconnected from the rest of the downstream processes. A lot of their planning and scheduling was ad hoc. It was very time-based, so it would require to look at a particular horizon. So that meant that the business got used to operating in the rhythm that meant that they would only be able to answer an effective question every week if their planning systems could only cope with weekly horizons. So now we consider the right-hand side, which is all of the new technologies. So we consider the types of emerging technologies that make most sense to achieve the outcomes for our customers. In this scenario, we have robotics, we have advanced quality control, quality embedded into the processes, the use of predictive maintenance that can vastly assist with the upkeep of the equipment, with constant feedback loops, together with the integration with sensors, IoT, IoT, SFTC, and I guess just the general term of optimization and analytics, utilizing all of the foundational and predictive technologies, machine learning, artificial intelligence wrapped up there. These are the types of systems that manufacturers are looking at it saying, we moved off initially and we offshored our operations from a cost competitive point of view. If we bring them back, if we're looking at nearshoring or reshoring, what are the things that we can do to improve our efficiencies from the get-go, because we have to remain competitive. And thirdly, we also consider the type of connectedness and removing those points of friction in that modern business digital platform. So if I can just expand a little bit on that, it's what areas of process or data friction needs to be overcome in an organization? What are the silos that require to be removed and integrated? And the best means that we can utilize with all the stakeholders to engage with the systems. The systems are there to support the process of better information and better decisions. And lastly, it's more the provision of systems and technologies, and it's not only about the technologies at play. I think a lot of companies, when they look at Industry 4.0, they begin the conversation with what technologies should we consider. But really here, it's about those equal parts, and what we mean by the equal parts is we understand that there is the provision of systems and technologies, but it's also about how we work with our customers as trusted partners along the journey to assist them to achieve their outcomes-based answers. So here, SYSPRO, we have the experience, the industry specialization, and know-how on how to do just that. And our focus is on the continued enrichment of our ecosystem to deliver on all of these aspects.
Thank you so much for that. You know, the impact of this pandemic not only has shown us, but almost forced the hand where the future of manufacturing distribution needs to focus on those emerging technologies. And your research has shown that ERP really can support this manufacturing area and help digitalize and provide solutions. And these solutions will resolve the biggest areas of this impact. We're talking about remote workforce enablement and implementation and automation of business systems, things like the handling of procurement and sourcing policy changes, as well as providing analytics in real time to support these guided decision-making areas. And while there's been some downtime, manufacturers have grown to realize that there's an opportunity in front of them, right? We are offering a 1 free hour of consulting time with our digital transformation experts. Please visit our Contact Us page on our website, which is panorama-consulting.com. Enter the code free hour, one word, along with your comments in the how we can help section of the form. Now, through our discussion, we've received a few questions from the audience, and I would like to touch base on a little of those right now. There's a lot of talk on the future of work and its potential impact on skilled and unskilled labor. What is the role of systems in the future of the workforce, and how will it impact on the manufacturing industry?
Thanks, Jen. Look, I think that's a good question for me to take. It is a great question, actually. And as we've heard today, even for manufacturing companies, the COVID pandemic has really expedited the implementation of critical systems throughout their operations. The adoption of more cloud solutions to help staff working flexibly, and what it's doing is obviously breaking down the geographical barriers to help businesses with cooperation and collaboration remotely. It's as we all know, it's pretty much mandatory for businesses and in fact a lot of our customers throughout the world as well. But we still can't be sure even how fast effective and underlying effective vaccines there are going to roll out throughout the world, or even when some of the back office staff are going to return to offices. Certainly in Australia, I can say that they're all still working from home, and if they're going to be allowed to go back anytime quickly, or even if they need to now. But what we need to keep in mind here is that these back office staff in particular, we really do need to make the most of the connecting and collaboration solutions that we have out there, and that what that means is that the technology choices that all businesses make out there should help them do the same for not just internally but with their customers and partners as well. So, but I guess one thing we need to consider here is that there's so much data out there, and with these distributed teams, they all need to connect to it. So the connecting and collaborating services to help free up the time is really going to be the glue that keeps these organizations together. We can't lose sight of that. And I guess one of the biggest questions has also been, and we've touched on it, is whether or not artificial intelligence, which everyone talks about, will prove to be a threat to some of the work that humans are doing at the moment. So, what the rise of the internet technology has been worrying for many people. And in fact, if the advancing technology that we're talking about will in fact destroy manufacturing jobs, and that's been around for quite some time now. So, human beings are supposedly competing against something that can in fact outperform us on almost anything, and that's a reality. So I guess what we do is we need to find what's the balance here, and how can we coexist with technologies like artificial intelligence. I mean, from my perspective, I think artificial intelligence is really going to keep creating new job roles that we hear about for the vast majority of people, even in manufacturing. So look, humans basically have got to learn to accommodate in intelligent machines as co-workers. We need to learn to collaborate with artificial intelligence, and what that will do is bring the best out in the workplace.
Thanks, Rob. And this is definitely a popular subject. We have another question that is asking, there's a lot of conversations around specific emerging tech, including AI, ML, robotics, IoT. How does a manufacturer navigate this?
I think I'll take that question, Jen.
Thanks, Bob.
I think when we consider the types of technologies typically discussed conjunctly with the term Industry 4.0, my first piece of advice is we need to always ask the critical question first. What problem are we trying to solve for? And really here we see an introduction of a new technology. And it's to enable a specific organizational change. And there are many. It could be, for example, to eliminate legacy processes or systems. It could be to address complexity. It could be to address silos. It could be to address integration or automation or digitalization. But it's at the heart of it, it's to remove inefficiencies and to improve on the current process. And a lot of this is paving the way to what we call an API-enabled business. So a business that is easily interchangeable, interoperable, connectable, and you can easily plug in any number of systems, platforms, and it can coexist. So again, to the question, it is about us first understanding what problem are we trying to solve. So we're either looking to address a specific customer-based value add or looking to digitalize an inefficient process. So for a manufacturer, in understanding the problem they're trying to solve, they then need to consider, well, what is the array or the best technologies that we have there to address that specific situation? Digital transformation is often best broken down into incremental applications, incremental steps, and it's about that path that an organization has seen for themselves, which is the future-ready digital self. And it's one project as part of a larger plan. So my advice to manufacturers that are asking the questions around, well, which emerging technologies should they be looking at, is to first consider where they're trying to get to as an organization. What does that business transformation look like? And then evaluate each of the technologies to perform that incremental step as a project based on a much larger plan.
Thanks, Paulo. Looks like we have time for one more. So let's see if we can squeeze one last question in here. We have a viewer who is asking, we've mentioned that many regions are exploring e-commerce solutions. How are B2B companies making that transition? And do you have any examples to share?
Yeah, Jen, look, I think I can take that one, given that Australia, is front and center there. I think, well, when I say that, I think that e-commerce solutions are definitely front and center, I should say, with more B2B companies making the move to online selling. They've had to, right? And that's not just in this region, it's in every region of the world. And look, I'll try and be as succinct as possible, but from my perspective, I can think of probably 5 key e-commerce trends that I think, or I know are on the rise this year, particularly with our customer base here locally. One of them is voice commerce. I think that's definitely going to be on the rise for sure, where people are increasingly relying on voice assistance devices like I can think of Amazon Echo, Alexa, Google Home, Google Assistant to do everything, and pretty much from waking them up to buying products online. So that'll be one. I think secondly, omni-channel shopping. I think that's going to become the new norm. I mean, when I refer to omni-channel, I'm referring to, I guess, providing shoppers, whether it doesn't matter what products they're buying from which company. It's got to be seamless and consistent, well, the experience does anyway, across all channels and all devices that people use these days. And obviously with the increase of mobile devices and voice assistants that I just mentioned, I can only imagine that the number of omni-channel customers will increase significantly this year, particularly in Southeast Asia as well. I mean, a third one would be, which we've spoken about today, is AI and how that's going to enhance the e-commerce experience across the board. I mean, first and foremost, AI pretty much acts as an online in-store associate by many counts, as it offers personalized guidance most of the time and recommendations to your customers. So AI can analyze data of past purchases and history and browsing behavior, which we're all scared of, and point them to products that they're more likely to purchase. So if some of our customers, and they are, if they implement these right AI strategies in their e-commerce stores, they're definitely going to see an increase in conversions and a decrease in return rates of their products that they're manufacturing. Just conscious of time, I'll just list 2 very quickly, and I think the last 2 that I want to mention are payment options. So I think new payment options are definitely going to emerge within our customer base. Sometimes customers choose a specific brand because they have a payment method that's not offered by the competition. So I think in e-commerce that's going to come to the fore as well. Obviously, digital wallets are important. Google Pay for some of the smaller businesses out there, Samsung, Apple Pay, PayPal, etc. But what I'm seeing now, even in this region, and cryptocurrencies, which it can be scary for a lot of people, and we've seen what Elon Musk has done recently. But I think it's a hot topic, and I think more customers will start accepting cryptocurrencies into the future, which is going to be interesting. So that's one trend I'll also see. And finally, I mean, I think just to sum it up, mobile commerce is still going to dominate, right? So, you know, as we all start trusting online shopping more and more, and people feel comfortable purchasing from their mobile devices, you know, businesses have to get that right. So you know, improving that experience for mobile users is going to be critical.
Rob, thanks. I appreciate the insight, and I look forward to seeing more people's future benefiting from businesses jumping into this and really taking advantage of these advances that are out there. I would like to thank Paulo, Rob, Darren, each of you for today's discussion. Please visit www.syspro.com to learn more about their industry-built ERP software. And if you would like to inquire about Panorama services, which can benefit your business needs, please reach out to us at panorama-consulting.com. You can also reach out directly to Alan Salton, who is our Director of Innovation at Panorama. Thanks, everyone.